All right, hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I have a short one. We have a little bit of Nick Fuentes. I feel like I was like slurring a little bit there, I don't know. Tired maybe. But today we're going to react to him speaking a little bit on the ICE raids and then multiculturalism and I believe the ADL. I don't know, I just kind of browsed through the second clip a little bit. But the reason why this is pertinent is coming up I'm going to be debating, I think it's Rob Noor and Stein. Maybe he meant Alex Stein. I'm not 100% sure. But on Modern Day Debate, I'm going to be debating them over whether ICE is doing more good than harm or vice versa. And obviously, given my positions, I'm going to say that ICE is doing more harm. It's mostly probably going to turn on whether we believe that immigration of all stripes is good or bad, because that will honestly answer the question of whether they're doing more harm than good. And so I guess, I'm interested to make this video. It'll help me see, what kind of arguments do right-wingers make to say that it's good to deport, non-criminals because of a nominal illegal status. We can hear Nick's arguments. Nick's arguments are very weak. They're basically just assertions without any premises, but I'm sure that you guys in the comments will, in a valiant attempt to defend your master Nick, you'll probably lay out a bunch of the right-wing arguments for why the deportations are actually based. And so, it'll give me a little bit of material to help me prep for what's to come. But yeah, that'll be next week coming up. So yeah, keep your eye out for that. Without further ado, let's get into the clip.
And I have a little bit of a hot take on this one, okay? I'm sure you've seen the news. And I talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago. I like it. I'm out here in Chicago in the streets, and every day we're seeing footage of Border Patrol and ICE agents marching through downtown Chicago. It's awesome. I love it. And they set up their detention center outside the city, and they're rounding up illegals. I don't know if you saw the latest video, but they sent in Black Hawk helicopters rappelling down from ropes, storming the building like Rainbow Six, marching them out. It's awesome. And my question is, why can't we do this to the entire country all the time? Like, why can't we do this to the South Side? I love it. But here's the problem. Trump is becoming extremely belligerent. ICE is becoming extremely belligerent. They're not even deporting a lot of people. They're doing these very big, sophisticated, complex raids, and they get like 30 people. That's not a lot. Understand, in order to do anything meaningful with deportations, we need like 10,000 people to leave every day for 4 years, okay? To even roll back the clock to 2020, before Joe Biden got into office with the illegal immigrant population, we need roughly 10,000 people to leave every day for the next 4 years. And we're not even close. We're talking like 800 per day. And so they'll raid an apartment complex with 200 guys, and they make 30 arrests. That's nothing. But I like the visuals, I like the energy, I like that on some level, they might be triggering some self-deportations. Certainly many illegal immigrants are in hiding right now. And they're having a problem with plumbers, carpenters, they're having a problem with truck drivers, because illegal immigrants, they worry about being deported. And at a certain point, there's going to be an economic incentive for them just to leave.
And so I want to stop there, but we'll let the clip play out. But it is funny that these people, they admit that they're not going after criminals. They admit that it's having deleterious impacts on the trades, on trucking, and it's ultimately going to harm American consumers and America's standing in the world. And so it's justified on the basis of complete formalism, legal formalism, which is pretty funny because, this is the guy who, by the way, often attacks, Jewish people as being legalistic and stuff. Well, that's how you're being right now. On the basis of a nominal status of legality, you have decided that it's better to substantively harm them and us in order to, maintain this strict adherence to formalism. It's very stupid. People get into this very dumb mindset of like, is it legal? Is it illegal? The question is it good or is it bad? I'm a law student, and even I don't get this narrow focus on whether something is legal or illegal. The question is whether it is good or bad, whether it is just or unjust, whether it helps or harms us. And it's undeniable that the deportations harm us. Not only do they inspire social division and uproars in the cities, but they deport mostly non-criminal good people who are contributing to the society. We need to find a way to reform the system such that people like this are not here illegally and such that they can actually pursue their betterment at our, not at our expense, but rather to better us as well. And so it's funny that every single part of reality cuts against these guys' arguments except for the nominal status of illegality. It's just really dumb. But yeah, I like that even he admits like this is having a deleterious impact on various sectors. And a lot of people will say, well, now Americans will get those jobs. Well, guess what? Those Americans don't exist. Look at our native population's demographic pyramid. It's almost inverted. We're going to run into the same problems that other countries that didn't pursue immigration like Japan did. And there's no answer to this. The only answer is, oh, maybe we'll have more kids. It's like, okay, Talk to me in 18 years. Let's see where we are when we didn't have a labor force for 18 years. I had a comment of some guy who just completely didn't understand this point. He was like, you don't think that, raising wages will incentivize people to go there? I'm not talking about whether it will incentivize people who are here to go there. I'm talking about whether the labor pool exists necessary to sustain and grow an industry. It's a question that goes beyond your basic understanding of macroecon 101.
If they can't go out and work, then they're going to go home. And honestly, that's how it should be. Why should you be able to get a driver's license and a job and drive to work every day? You have no legal standing in the country, and we just tolerate that. The incentives need to be turned around, because that's really what it is. If you're poor in any country, there is just a giant green flag. Come on in, get a job, get Section 8.
The question, by the way, is not whether legal status should bestow these rights. The first question is how we bestow legal status. Because if we have an improper method by which we delineate who is legal and who is illegal, by which we apply the status of illegality and legality, then it actually doesn't matter these downstream questions of what follows from being a citizen or a non-citizen. You need a good immigration system before you can answer these downstream questions, or else you are going to suboptimally filter people and get a situation, where you have a bunch of illegals, but who really on the substance only benefit us.
Get food stamps, get the finest healthcare in the world, and you really have nothing to worry about, because it's like no one's going to arrest you, no one's going to remove you. You're one of those hard-working ones that's making America great. So the incentives need to be flipped, where people say, yikes, I don't want to be in America with no legal standing because I could be removed at any time. Good. Here's the problem. So they set up these detention centers in Portland and in Chicago, two very liberal cities, and they're doing these very belligerent actions, marching Border Patrol in full uniform through the city, doing these highly publicized raids with fixed-wing drones, helicopters. They're terrorizing the population. It's deliberate. And by that, all I mean is they're being visible. They want the illegal population to know that they're looking for them. That's part of creating the disincentive.
All right, so that's that. The thing that I'll say before we go to the next clip is just that every time that I make these arguments, the ultimate question is, how does this impact us? How does it impact our standing? I am someone who believes in America. I am someone who wants the best for America. And whenever you advocate for these policies which harm America, you're not America first like Nick says you are. You're basically an isolationist protectionist who is more of a racialist than a nationalist. You don't care about the standing of the country. You care about the preservation of a people, even at the expense of the nation, because you equate the people with the nation. But you don't understand that, number one, that's not America. That's what we're going to get into the next clip. America is not an ethnic group. If it was, then Nick wouldn't be here. It's that simple. He has no WASP blood. He's Italian, Mexican, and Irish, I believe. Nothing in there is founding stock. There were a few, I think there were a few Irish people, I'm not sure, but they were not the majority of the early American founders. Even to be Scottish was to be deviant. They were primarily white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And, to just pretend that like a Catholic Italian Mexican is part of that ethnic group, they're just not. You have to broaden the scope to say that is the case. And in 2025, that makes sense. But guess what? In 1776, it didn't, which is why Ben Franklin excluded not only people like Nick, definitely people like Nick, but people like, German people. People scoff at that, but Ben Franklin is one of the most important early Americans that there were. He was influential on every major founding event. And so to disregard his opinion as anachronistic is to disregard the very foundation that you attempt to appeal to. The foundation doesn't support you. If you want to appeal to the foundation, it's going to preclude your worldview. But let's go to the next clip. And in short, my point that I'm making there is just that immigration of all stripes is beneficial to the country. Does that mean that we want to open the border and let everyone in? No, but it means that we need reform such that we can encourage the flow of labor across the border for people who are honestly seeking work and not seeking to harm us, but rather to benefit us, just as every group of immigrants have done overall throughout our history. All right, so this one, he's going to talk about the distinctly European Christian identity of America.
Why do we oppose the Jewish left? We oppose the ADL and the Jewish left because we believe that America is particular. It's not a melting pot. That's not what makes America great. We believe that America has a distinct identity rooted in its European heritage, that it's white, that it's Christian, and our American culture proceeds from our Christian heritage and our European heritage, and in some sense, our European genetics.
So again, just to say, you're broadening the scope. You can say, our European heritage, but that you don't have the same conception of whiteness that the founders did. And so by European, he means white. But the founders didn't conceive of white and European as equal sets. They conceived of whiteness as a subset of Europeanness. And many of them sought to exclude large swaths of Europeans. So if you're going to appeal to this founding notion that some of the founders had, not all of them, by the way, towards the end, people like Ben Franklin were actually abolitionists, and they were much more on the egalitarian side than these people like to make them seem. You can look into a guy named Benjamin Lay, who really influenced Benjamin Franklin in a lot of these regards. Or you can also look to early states like Pennsylvania, which sought to be actually, yes, objective melting pots, where they said that whether you're Jewish, Muslim, whatever, they said that you can come here. Just look into like Pennsylvania's founding. That is literally what the creed, what the founding idea of Pennsylvania was meant to be. And so, I mean, but he doesn't know that because he's never read American history, and it's clear. So that's one. Two, to talk about Christianity. America, from its founding, has been, up to that point, it was the most secular nation in time. Not only that, but the early American founders were sons of the Enlightenment. They believed in science and rationality. You can talk about the disputes that they had between various phraseology in the founding documents. There was conflict. Some people wanted a little bit more of a religious bent to the wording. Some people wanted a more secular bent to the wording. But the point is to say that it was not some Catholic nation by any means. They were less religious than Nick is. By far. Just read Ben Franklin's autobiography. This was a secular man. This was a man who did not believe in any particular sect of Christianity, and he really only enjoyed Christianity insofar as it proved a good practical guide to living. And then guess what? He even made his own practical guide to living. He was going to make his own book on ethics, precisely because this was not a man who was really obsessed with religion. He was obsessed with science. This was the birth of science. And he was one of the pioneers. So you're just misunderstanding the founding.
So we believe that that's what America is. And to the extent...
And by the way, this is not to say that the average American wasn't an extremely religious person. It's to say that the people who founded America did not harbor these kinds of ideas. They were not like Nick. They were liberals. They were elitists. They believed in a separation between church and state. And a lot of the times they were not really particularist with regard to like some Christian sect. They weren't very strong believers. They were, again, like I said, sons of the Enlightenment.
The Jews come here, and they're not the same racially. They don't share our religion. In many ways, they don't share the same values. They're like socialists and communists. We're saying, no, you can't redefine what America is. You can't come here and tell us what our country is. Our country is one thing, and, you can try and force yourself into it, but you're never going to change what America is. This is the tension between the white...
But what is America? Because what you've tried to define it as is just ahistorical. So you have to put forth a different proposition that defines America. That is an unfortunate freeze frame right there. But again, also, when you talk about Jews as being distinct, Nick 100% believes that people like Sicilians are white. Michael Knowles, he would believe that he's white. Well, guess what? They're basically genetically indistinguishable from Ashkenazi Jews. So where do you draw this fuzzy line that you think separates various people? We have broadened the scope so large to such a degree that it includes so many people. Where you have, if you look at the far right, it's like a joke now. You have people like Gypsy Crusader who are extremely brown, who lead all of these idiots in the name of white supremacy. And it's just like your side has completely lost the basis. If you're going to be this white identitarian, you need a coherent notion of what white is. And it's certainly not one that includes people like Gypsy Crusader, or if we're being honest, even Nick. He might look white, but are we really going by looks? Because if we are, then how are Jews not white? Unless you make the line genetic, in which case you would have to cut Nick out, you have to include Jews. You have to include, again, people like Gypsy Crusader. And then it's just a laughable definition of white that is completely expansive. And you're more diverse than the left at that point. I mean, if you go look at communists, a lot of the times they're whiter than people on the far right. And what does that say? These ideas are self-contradictory.
Right, and the ADL, the Christian Identity Movement, and the ADL. This is why the ADL hates the far right. Because the far right, to the extent that it's made up of traditionalists, traditional Christians, traditional Americans, white identitarians, we're trying to preserve America. And we're saying that what America is white and Christian. And the ADL, to the extent that they're an advocate for the Jews and the marginalized immigrant Jews and all the other marginalized racial, ethnic, religious minorities, the ADL is saying, no, that's an extremist viewpoint. America's for everybody. It's not just for whites. It was never for whites. It's not just for Christians. It's for everybody. And this is why the ADL is working to make America less white and less Christian. Because the less white and less Christian it is, the weaker that claim will become, that America is or should be or ever was white and Christian. This is why the ADL is set against the far right. And that's why the ADL is branding white identitarians, Christian nationalists, and critics of Israel as hateful, fanatics, extremists, and is seeking to get them censored.
It's also so funny that he paints this as being, they're doing this because it's good for Israel. You think multiculturalism is good for Israel? Have you seen the American reaction on the left to October 7th and the subsequent developments? Are you kidding me? It hasn't been good for Israel. What are you talking about? If anything, multiculturalism has been bad for them because Jewish people a lot of the times look white, and so they've been grouped in with white people. And there are a lot of Jews who are actually starting to realize this. This is why you start to see some of them shift right. But the notion that it's good, I mean, it's just contradictory with his other beliefs. It can't be the case. And this is how you know that this conspiratorial mindset with regard to Israel is just kind of nonsensical. These people will say that X and the negation of X are proof of like Israeli conspiracies or like, you know, Jewish advocacy at the highest level that manipulates things that happen on the lower level. I mean, it can't be the case that they promote multiculturalism because it is good for Jews, but also they want to kick out Muslims and stuff because it's bad for Jews. At that point, they're both promoting and not promoting multiculturalism as a means to aid their ultimate end, which is the preservation and development of Israel. But then we now have an unfalsifiable theory, upon which we can't say either X or the negation of X to disprove, which goes to show that these ideas actually are not meritorious. They're unfalsifiable in the sense that nothing you say can go against them, not because they're right, but because they're ill-formed theories. And it's funny, I've been called Jewish before because I say this. It's like, I'm not Jewish. I'm just like not an idiot.
And banned and destroyed and their reputations and lives ruined. That is our opposition to the ADL. That's why the ADL considers us to be beyond the pale. Because for 100 years, they have been advocates for a multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic, religiously pluralistic American society on behalf of the immigrant Jews, on behalf of the eternal wanderers, those that are not assimilable. And to the extent that they're speaking on behalf of blacks and Muslims and gays and women, it's again because a rising tide lifts all boats. They want to push back in as broad a possible way a united front against the dominant white Christian majority, which has the ability to keep all those groups down.
All right, so that is that. We got to hear from our old friend Nick. It's been a while since I made a video on him. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, check out my Discord. If you want to debate, I'll put that in the comments. Check out my Twitter, Veritable C on X. And yeah, I'll see you.